A few months ago, I reviewed Gardens of the Moon, the first volume of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Now I've finally finished the sequel, Deadhouse Gates, by Steven Erikson. Some reviews of the series suggest you can skip the first book and just start with this one, but I would not recommend it. This one is a lot easier to get into, but there are enough returning characters and continuing storylines that it would absolutely spoil a lot of book one if you read this first. As before, we get maps in the front. This time they are all of the continent of 7 cities, where most of the book is set, which is a completely different continent to the Genabakis setting of book 1. 2 of the maps specifically cover the Chain of Dogs section, and they are a bit of a spoiler, so you should probably avoid looking at them. And there's another useful list of all the important characters in the book. It's about the same number as last time, but only a few of them have carried over. At the start of the book, the Malazan Empire has been ruling over this continent for, a while. They're kind of like the British Empire in India, or America, or Australia. They think they've got it all under control, but they do not. Partway into the book, all of the natives rise up and rebel against the Malazan rulers, killing any non-native they come across, which includes basically all of the main characters. So for most of the book, you're following these different groups of characters as they flee for their lives and try to find somewhere safe. We meet the first group at the start, as the Malazan Empress decides to get rid of all the nobles who might be a threat to her rule. This includes Felisin, the 15-year-old sister of Gunos Paran from the first book. She is sold into slavery and sent to a mining camp, where she becomes a prostitute and a drug addict in order to survive. It's quite grim, there's nothing explicitly described, but it's certainly implied. Once the rebellion kicks off, Felisin escapes the camp, with the help of her companions. Haboric, a former priest who has no hands, and Bordin, who's kind of her bodyguard. All 3 of them absolutely hate each other, but they have to work together in order to survive. There is a particularly memorable sequence where the group are attacked by blood flies, which are like a combination of the worst insects in the entire world. It's absolutely horrific, and will put you off the idea of going anywhere with a warm climate. They're not the most likeable bunch, with all of them sniping at each other constantly. Felisin makes a lot of questionable decisions. Haboric goes through some weird mystical transformation, which is never properly explained. But their journey does take them to some unexpected places, and it does not end up as you might imagine. The only problem is there is no real resolution to this whole storyline. Apparently that happens in book 4, so hopefully I'll get to that while the events of this book are still fresh in my memory. The second group are all characters from Gardens of the Moon. Fiddler, Kalam, Crocus and Absalar, who got on the boat at the end of the last book, and get off it at the beginning of this one. At the start you do kind of latch onto these people as they are the most familiar, but it's not long before you get to know all the groups just as well. This lot are only passing through 7 cities, on their way to assassinate the Malazan Empress. Their timing is extremely bad, to say the least. Through them we learn more about the mysterious Azath, who popped out of nowhere at the end of book 1. Now we learn that even the immortal characters don't really know anything about them, so the readers aren't the only ones. All we know is that the Azath houses, including the Deadhouse of the title, act as kind of a fast travel system, which lets people travel between different continents and possibly even different worlds, if Malazan turns out to be part of a multiverse, as so many fictional universes do nowadays. I did think that this storyline might turn out to be the only linear thread throughout all 10 books, with each one following the next stage in these characters' journey, alongside all the new characters in each one. But surprisingly, their stories are all wrapped up quite nicely by the end of this book. Obviously, they could still come back in the next volume, but I suspect they've been parked for now, and we won't see them again until further down the road. The third group are Mappo and Icarium, who were mentioned in Gardens of the Moon but never appeared. They are the latest representatives of immortal non-human races in this world. Last time we had the Tistiandi and the Talanimas, now we have a Jagat and a Trell. I guess it's more creative to invent a load of new races, rather than rely on the traditional elves and dwarves and goblins and so on, but it does make it much harder to visualise them. They've been travelling the world together for thousands of years, but Icarium has problems with his memory and doesn't remember his past. We do find out the real story behind their partnership, and it turns out to be quite a tragic tale. But there is also a lot of humour in these sections, as they meet Iskral Pust, a priest of Shadow, who is stark raving mad and comes out with all the best lines. It seems there's always one eccentric character like this in every book. Last time round it was Krupp, and you can't help wondering what it would be like if the two of them met. I'm sure Mappo and Ikarian will return in future volumes, as their story is clearly not over yet. Finally, we follow Duke the Historian, who basically hangs around with the Malazan occupiers, recording what they do for posterity. When the rebellion kicks off, he ends up joining in the Chain of Dogs, which is the last surviving Malazan army, escorting thousands of refugees across the entire continent, in the hopes of reaching the last city where the rebellion hasn't taken hold. This is by far the strongest part of the book. Arguably they should have called the whole thing Chain of Dogs in the first place. It's absolutely brutal, full of gruesome battle scenes where countless people are slaughtered, and the sheer hopelessness of the journey makes it all feel very bleak, so it is something of a relief when the focus switches to one of the other storylines. There are all sorts of twists along the way, and it does not end as you might expect. Major characters die, but there are hints they may be brought back later through various mystical methods. So the ending isn't completely hopeless, but there are certainly lots of loose ends left over to be revisited in Book 4. Overall, I'd say Deadhouse Gates is a big improvement on Gardens of the Moon. The storytelling is a lot more straightforward, the characters are much stronger, and they only focus on a few of them this time round, so they all have more space to develop. There are still certain plot points left unexplained or unresolved, but much fewer than last time. It's a long read, but definitely worthwhile, and finishing it feels like you've walked the Chain of Dogs all by yourself, but with much fewer physical injuries. So I will definitely be carrying on with Book 3, Memories of Ice, at some point. It looks like that returns to the characters from Gardens of the Moon, so it'll be good to see what they're up to now. But it is 1,200 pages long, so before I embark on it I will have to have a bit of a break, read something lighter instead. Dungeon Crawler Carl has been getting some good reviews, so I think I'll read that as a break from Malazan, and possibly alternate the two series going forward. I may or may not review that one here, but I think I probably will review Memories of Ice when I get to it. If nothing else, it's a good way of processing what I've read and trying to make sense of it. So press subscribe if you want to see more of my book reviews, and I'll see you next time.